Welcome back to the 1-0 podcast brought to you by Student Affairs. I'm Seth Engle,
And I'm Zach Allen.
and we have one more regular season game to go here before it's bowl season, before we get a little month off,
Yep.
before, that big end of the season wrap up, prior to, what's supposed to be a pretty crazy 2024. Zach, I know you're home right now for Thanksgiving. How are things?
It's great. I'm ready to dig in tomorrow, but first things first, gotta cover Penn State football.
I don't know. I don't think Penn State's gonna have time to, really spend Thanksgiving with their families this year. They're gonna be over in Detroit, at Ford
Yeah.
Field for a Black Friday game against Michigan State. It's a weird game, right? Because Penn State is out of playoff contention. They're out of Big Ten title contention, and Michigan State is just, probably hoping for this season to end. It's been long
Yeah.
with Mel Tucker and their struggles outside of that. Going into this game, what are your vibes? What's this week kind of been like? And what are you kind of looking for?
Yeah, I think it's also a weird game because it's on a Friday, on Black Friday. And it's just, they haven't had a Friday game. But, you know, honestly, in terms of what to play for, I think that it's just trying to scrape into that New Year's Six territory. Obviously, they're not going to make the playoff. Um, and a New Year's Six probably isn't what they were hoping for going into the season. But there still is a lot on the line. If Penn State loses this, they're probably eliminated from New Year's Six contention as well. Maybe. I mean, we saw them play Arkansas as a 7-6 teams on New Year's Day. It wasn't a New Year's Six game, but it was still a good bowl game. But I think it's just trying to get that momentum going into the bowl game, trying to still shake off Michigan, and just the disappointment surrounding that loss, as well as letting Jaywan Sider and Ty Howell kind of get some more play calling experience before the postseason starts. And maybe, you know, for some of these players, it'll be their last taste of the regular season and kind of finishing that off strong.
Yeah, you talk about Jaywan and Ty Howell get another crack at an offense. We don't know if Drew Aller is going to be a part of it. I mean, we expect that. I think James Franklin said he expects to have Drew back for that game. Whether Drew plays or not, how much are you expecting to see of Bo Pribula, who played for a majority of that second half against Rutgers?
Yeah, after the game, James kind of said it was the plan to play both of them anyway. I don't know the extent of that. It obviously wasn't going to be a quarterback by committee or anything, because considering before Drew went out with the injury, Bo only took one snap. Um, so if Drew does play, I think it'll just be like a couple snaps here and there. They might bring out whatever, the two quarterback package, maybe just Bo by himself, which screams run play. Um, but if he's not out, I think what we should be looking for is whether or not Bo will pass or not. I know when he came in against Rutgers, it was, I think I counted, it was 17 straight run plays before he attempted a pass. And it was just, a dump off at the line of scrimmage on an RPO to Tyler Warren, who kind of ran a little bit. But yeah, I do think that, Drew Aller's availability is definitely something to look for. And it's kind of a mystery to us because James doesn't really get into timetables or really even specific injuries at all unless they're season ending, which he hasn't done. So I think that's a good sign. But as far as Bo goes, I think assuming Drew plays, it'll just be a couple appearances here and there. Maybe if they need to switch something up, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, Bo has only attempted 8 passes the whole year, and he's played in 9 or 10 games, which is pretty interesting. They're using him like he's Will Levis. They're not letting him throw the ball. He is a straight rusher, and he's been doing pretty well with it, for the
Yeah,
most
I
part.
mean,
Like he
he
has
is.
an explosiveness that not even Penn State's running backs have been able to muster up consistently, and Bo's taken way less rush attempts than they are.
Yeah, I mean his first rush against Rutgers tied the season long.
Yeah, it was 39 yards. It was impressive. And it gave them a spark that they weren't necessarily getting when Drew was in. So I think you do have to give him a chance because I think he derails defensive game plans. I think he gives you a good chance to win. Moving on, you kind of talk about this potentially being the last game, potentially for a lot of these veteran players. Maybe the last game for defensive coordinator Manny Diaz as well. Who knows if maybe this is right around the time when guys start looking for their jobs, and he is a dude who has been, you know, maybe the best defensive coordinator in college football the past 2 years. I think you
Yeah.
could make that argument. Do you think this is Manny Diaz's last game as Penn State's defensive coordinator?
I I definitely do. I think there's a much greater chance that he's not in state college by the time the start of the next season goes around. This is a guy who has major head coaching experience. He came from Miami, which is, you know, a good Power 5 program. And I think even before this season, people kind of thought, will Manny be here? Will he take another head coaching job? I think just the air around when he was hired was, oh, this is like a temporary thing, maybe a couple years, 3 if they're really lucky, which I guess next season would be the third. So unless Penn State gets really lucky, I don't think Manny's going to be around, and I don't think that was the expectation for Manny Diaz to be a long time defensive coordinator for Penn State. I think this was, after his tenure at Miami, trying to establish himself again defensively and get his coaching momentum going to find another head coaching gig when the time comes.
Yeah, and then that time may come. I mean, we're seeing already a ton of head coaching vacancies. I
Yeah.
think a lot of teams are trying to move on this offseason ahead of, a big 2024 that's going to see the playoff expand, and they're going to see, expanded conferences as well. It's already a good group of schools looking for coaches right now. I just don't know if any of them at the moment are clear fits for Diaz. I mean, you look down the line, there's San Diego State, Michigan State, Mississippi State, Syracuse, Boise State, and then obviously Texas A&M, which is the biggest one. And I just don't know if any of those scream fits for Diaz. Maybe Mississippi State makes sense, but like, does it? I don't really think it does. Because what's going to be different with Mississippi State rather than Miami? If it didn't work with Miami, why is it going to work at another hard school to win? Maybe we kind of have to wait and see. I know Michigan's going to have a vacancy potentially if Harbaugh leaves. There are going to be a couple of schools that follow suit in the head coaching position. Talk about Manny leaving. There's, without a doubt, this should be the last game for a couple players as well.
Yeah.
Penn State could see 3 first-round picks this year. I think that this might be the last game for Chop Robinson, Olu Fashanu, and maybe Kalen King as well.
Yeah.
You think that all 3 of those are it's in their best interest to kind of head to the draft?
I definitely think first and foremost, Olu's going. I think people expected him to go last year, and it was kind of, oh my God, Penn State just hit it out of the park, bringing him back. So I think Olu for sure is gone. He's projected a top 5 pick, top 10 pick, maybe even the first offensive lineman off the board. Chop, I feel like he will leave as well. I think he has all the momentum going for him. He's had a great season. If you're going to be a first round pick, I mean, I don't see why you return to college another year and potentially get injured. So I also think Chop is going to leave a little early. And if you had asked me about Kalen, I think a few weeks ago I would have said, oh, obviously he's one of the best cornerbacks in college football. He's definitely going to be out of here. And while I still do think he's probably going to leave, I think his draft stock has dropped a little bit in recent weeks, especially that Ohio State game. Granted, it was against probably the greatest college receiver in college football right now, and Marvin Harrison Jr. But I just don't think he's played that great in recent weeks. I still think he's a great cornerback. He's Penn State's clear number one guy. Um, I just think maybe his draft stock has gone down a little bit, but I still think he's going to be gone. And even past those three guys, I like the whole offensive line pretty much is going to be gone. Um, you could even Johnny Dixon's probably going to be gone. There's just going to be a lot of guys that are going to be getting up out of here this offseason.
Yeah, you mentioned Chop. I mean, obviously Olu is going to go. He could be a top 5 pick this year. In my opinion, he was going to be a first rounder last year. Didn't go, but Chop, like you're right with saying that he has the momentum right now. You could make the argument that that Rutgers game was the best game of his year. I mean, that strip sack that is going to be playing on repeat, on the film of a number of scouts across the league. He's an electric prospect. He's quick. He's powerful. He's a really good edge prospect. Kalen King is an interesting one because maybe he looked really good last year, but that could have been a product of the fact that he was facing number 2 receivers, while Joey Porter Jr. was holding down the fort on the other side. But he also hasn't been targeted that much this year. He's definitely gotten an increase the past couple weeks, maybe since Ohio State. But he hasn't received the same number of targets as he did in that All-American year in 2022. Besides them, you're right. There are a lot of guys who could leave. But a lot of those guys also have eligibility to return. There are a number of guys in the team who just played their 5th year, and it appears as if they could be heading to the draft because they've been here forever. But they have a 6th year of eligibility from COVID that they very well could use. There are a number of guys like that. So it's kind of hard to rule out all these veterans, this early in the year. But, I think Adese Isaac probably should go to the draft. I think he's going to be a sleeper pick, and he could honestly rise to 2nd or 3rd round. I think he's going to have a good showing in the combine. His knee's healed, or his Achilles is healed. Achilles is healed sounds funny because Achilles heel. But besides him, yeah, there are a number of guys who could test the waters. I'm gonna give a quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll get back into it. Penn State Student Affairs understands that college comes with unexpected challenges, whether it's groceries, rent, or an unexpected medical bill. They've got resources to support you through different hurdles. You might be eligible for assistance with meals, toiletries, rent, even healthcare. Reach out to the Office of Student Care and Advocacy to walk through resources and answer any questions you may have. Penn State is more than a university. It's a community supporting success. Don't let circumstances hold you back from thriving, succeeding, and making the most of your time here. Thank you to Penn State Student Affairs. Let's get back into it. I want to talk about potential replacements because this could be a wild offseason for Penn State if they have to look for an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator at the same time. I don't know where the money comes from that. You're kind of throwing it all at these guys all at the same time. Pat Kraft is probably pretty anxious. Do you have any idea like where they could look? Like what exactly are they going to look for when they're looking for these offensive coordinators and also on the defensive side?
Yeah, I just feel like the priority might be the offensive coordinator. I think, especially after this season, Penn State's always had a good defense. Brent Pry, Manny Diaz. I feel like, I don't know, just the talent they have, a defensive coordinator can come in and just pick up really without a hitch. More so than maybe an offensive coordinator. And especially given the frustrations that they had this year on the offensive side of the football, I think offensive coordinator probably should be the priority over the defensive coordinator this offseason if in terms of money they're throwing around. We talked a little bit about this last week. There's a few guys on the offensive side that stand out. There's Sean Lewis, Joe Moorhead, and I mean, honestly, the more I think about it, I thought about it this whole week. I think Joe Moorhead just makes the most sense. He already knows Franklin. He's already been here. He's hasn't really had that much success since he left Penn State. So maybe he can pull maybe a Manny Diaz where he gets his momentum back after being a head coach. Granted, Akron is a lot different than Miami, but Akron's still horrible. So
Yeah, Mississippi State though. He was pretty
yeah,
mediocre there.
he was mediocre, and then he was also the offensive coordinator at Oregon.
But
Um, so I think he's probably who makes the most sense. And then we talked about this last week. Sean Lewis too. I think he also fits. And there might be some names out there that we don't even know about that could just come in and maybe get hired out of nowhere, and we'd be surprised. So, but overall, I think the offensive coordinator has to be the priority.
yeah, I said Sean Lewis is the guy last week that he does make a lot of sense. I think he's a nice regional fit. He's had success. He's had multi-year experience as a head coach. But then that Syracuse job opened up, and that kind of changed things because he used to coach at Syracuse. So maybe that makes more sense as a head coach. I don't think he would turn down a Power Five head coaching job at his former school
Yeah,
over an offensive coordinator job at Penn State, which hasn't shown to be
too fruitful.
too safe of a job. It's 5 OCs now in 9 years. So I don't know. As much as I think Sean Lewis would be a great hire, I really do think that he could be the favorite for that Syracuse job.
Yeah,
Moorhead makes sense, I think, for a number of reasons, but he's not on the open market right now. I don't think he would want to kind of leave this head coaching job unless he's really miserable. That really comes down to Akron pulling the plug after 2 years.
hmm
Defensively, still early. There's a
yeah,
lot of movement right now. But one guy who I thought Penn State could potentially look at, and maybe they did look at when Brent Pry left, was Elijah Robinson, who is currently the interim head coach at Texas A&M. He's their defensive line coach. Um, he's someone that I think has just been waiting for a promotion. And he got it with Texas A&M.
hmm
And he is one of the best recruiters in the country. He has been very successful at a struggling program the past couple of years. And he's a Penn State alum, and he's young. I think he's only 38 years old, so he's got a lot to prove still. But I think he has proven a lot to
yeah,
this point. That would be, if I'm Penn State, that would be the home run hire that I'm looking for if Manny Diaz leaves. We don't know if he's leaving.
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
after all this, what he could easily just come back. Like there has been no like rumors or anything that he's gonna leave. I feel like it's
yeah,
just assumed.
yeah,
Given
because Brent Pry had head coaching opportunities too when he
yeah,
was at Penn State, and he turned them down. And he waited for the one that was the right fit for him. So Manny could come back. We'll see what happens there. Um, Regardless, Penn State is playing for a bowl game on Saturday. They're playing for New Year's Six or bust. It's looking like Peach Bowl. It is looking like the Peach Bowl.
yeah,
If they win this week, I've seen some Fiesta Bowl talk too. I've seen Citrus Bowl, but Peach Bowl probably makes the most sense. I've seen Tulane there, Missouri, Ole Miss, probably not Alabama anymore, which would have been fun. Do you think that there are like bowl implications? Let's say if you're a guy who wants to go to the NFL draft and you have the opportunity to opt out, are you going to opt out based on it being a New Year's Six bowl versus not, or does it not matter to you?
I feel like for Olu it doesn't really matter. Last year I know we saw players that we thought were gonna opt out and not opt out because it was the Rose Bowl. Now the Peach Bowl is not it's a great bowl game. It's one of the best bowl games, but I don't think it has the same, you know, history behind it like the Rose Bowl does. But still, like some of those guys we talked about earlier that might be on the fence, a great bowl game performance in a New Year's Six bowl against a team like Ole Miss, Tulane, Missouri, or even if they get in the Fiesta Bowl against, whether it be Oregon or whoever loses that Pac-12 championship, I think there's a lot to gain from playing in a bowl game. Um, but again, I think the guys at the top, like Chop Robinson, who, you know, who faced an injury scare earlier this season, they might be like, I kind of don't want to risk anything. And really, how can you blame them? But I think overall, like there's a big difference from the Peach Bowl to a non New Year's Six bowl game. I think like even the one they played against Arkansas, it's it's just playing in the New Year's Six bowl game to me, I feel like would just be amazing. If you're not making the playoff anyway, that's the best you can get. Like that's what teams play for. That other than the playoff, they're playing for a New Year's Six bowl game, and I don't think just because it's not the playoff, all these players are going to sit out. I think a lot of these guys are going to play to try and boost their draft stock.
Yeah, it keeps them in that great status. They're not elite, but they are great.
Yeah,
In that threshold. I will say it would be a bit of a letdown if they end up playing Tulane in the Peach
it
Bowl.
would. It would be like the 2019 Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. Which derailed viewership. It was a blowout. Wasn't fun, and I don't think it does as much for your momentum as beating a good team in a bowl game does. Like Penn State beat the Pac-12 champion in last year's Rose Bowl, and I think that meant a lot. I don't think that beating Tulane in the Peach Bowl is really going to do much moving forward for you. But anyway, those are the implications from this week against Michigan State on Friday. It's Black Friday. Zach, give me your score prediction for that game.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Penn State 31, Michigan State 10. I mean, Michigan State has struggled. They've been through a lot this season. Their offense is the worst in terms of points in the Big Ten, which is not a good sign when you're playing Penn State's defense. And like we've seen all season, I think with two interim offensive coordinators aside, Penn State's defense continually sets up their offense in positions to score points. And I really don't think, whether Drew Aller plays or not is going to affect the score a whole lot, given that Penn State's defense is going to set up their offense with great field position like they always do. So I really don't see this being too close, even though it's not at Michigan State, but it's still in their home territory. I don't see this really being a close game.
Yeah, neither do I. I got 35-7. I think it's going to be another single digit showing for the opposing offense. I do think Penn State's defense is just so locked in as they've been all year. Offense, maybe in a second game under Howell and Snyder, they find their stride. Michigan State's defense is nowhere close to as good as Rutgers. Rutgers played a good game last week. I just don't see it being the same thing. Also, I think it helps that it's at night. Because State's played, how many noon games in a row. So I think that having that extra sleep and being able to kind of reset your mind during the day, it's going to be low key for them, and I think they're going to be able to handle business accordingly. But anyway, that does it for us. Want to know pod. We will chat again next week. We'll do a bit of a season in review. It's crazy. It's come to this point. I feel like the season just started.
Quick.
Yeah, it has been very quick, but we'll have more for you. Zach, have a great Thanksgiving. I will see you
too, Seth.
back in town from Detroit.